横にどうしてござる
Hello, everyone.
Hello to you all. Well, Bunraku, or Japanese puppet theater, one of the traditional Japanese performing arts. And no doubt, Hiromi-san, you have seen lots of Bunraku.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Well, when I was a small child, my mother took me to see it, should I say, a few times, because she couldn't find a babysitter. But I must say I didn't understand it at that time. And when I was in junior high school, the whole class went to see it for a sort of initiation. But even then I found it a bit difficult to understand because of the feudalistic ideas.
Yes.
But no doubt you've been living in Japan for quite some time, Ken-sensei. You've seen it many times.
Well, you're hitting back, aren't you, Hiromi-san? I've got to confess, of course, that I haven't seen Bunraku many times, but when I came to Japan many years ago for the first time, I was in Osaka, and I did see Bunraku in Osaka, and I believe I saw a very famous puppeteer. But as this title of our program today says, Bunraku takes time, and perhaps I haven't taken enough time to appreciate it.
Perhaps you're right. Actually, quite a few Japanese say that Bunraku is outdated or uninteresting, but it's not fair because many of them haven't even seen it once.
That's true. Well, that's very true. So anyway, today we've invited an American lady to the studio who thinks that Bunraku is very exciting and fascinating and interesting and up to date. So let's ask her what it is she finds so interesting and fascinating about Bunraku.
Our guest today is Barbara Curtis Adachi. She's married to James Adachi, an American lawyer of Japanese descent, and she has, well, you have lived in Japan for a long time, and you've been studying Japanese history and art, especially traditional crafts and performing art, haven't you?
My goodness, Barbara, you sound like a very cultural lady. Anyway, welcome and very nice to see you today.
Thank you. I'm always happy to be able to try and share some of my enthusiasm for Bunraku.
Well, Hiromi-san and I are playing games, asking each other how many times we've seen Bunraku. But I think we can ask you, and I'm sure we're going to get a good answer, that say you have no doubt seen Bunraku innumerable times.
Well, I would say thousands of times, yes. But the first time I saw it, I was 11 years old. And I was taken to Bunraku by a charming lady, Etsu Sugimoto, who was famous as the author of The Daughter of a Samurai. She was 61, and she took me to a wonderful performance about which I remember almost nothing. It was very confusing to me. These large dolls being moved around on stage, but Mrs. Sugimoto wept copiously. And I thought I should be polite, so I cried copiously. I remember little but using a handkerchief.
So we can't say it was love at first sight then for you, Bunraku.
I would say not, no. It wasn't until the 1960s when my children went off to boarding school and when I found myself only 5 minutes away from the National Theater that I took up Bunraku again and became intrigued by it.
So your current love affair with Bunraku began about, what, 20 years ago or something like that?
About then, yes. It was Bunguro, the famous old Bunguro, whom I saw with Mrs. Sugimoto when I was a child. And I saw him once in a while in the 50s. And then in 1968, I had the very great good fortune of meeting him and getting to know him a little bit. And it was he who really set the fires for me. He had such enthusiasm and interest and so much to tell me that I just took off.
You said Bungoro, but was it Monjuro?
It was Monjuro who was the deshi of Bungoro, yes.
Yes.
Bungoro was the old
Yes,
man, and Monjuro was his deshi whom I met in 1968, 2 years before he died.
Anyway, Barbara, you were kind enough to bring your own Bunraku doll here, and I'm sure the viewers are dying to know who she is and who would use it.
So am I.
Well, this is Osono. Osono figures in a very well-known play, Hade Sugata Onna Mainginu. This doll was made for Monjuro, a great puppeteer whom I met in 1968. The story is the story of a very lonely wife. Although she's married to someone named Hanshichi, the marriage was never consummated, and Hanshichi is always off with his lover, his mistress, Sankatsu. And there's a very, very famous scene that you will be seeing in which Osono gives a long and very sad soliloquy.
Well, now, I remember and have seen, of course, on television the puppets, and they're very lively, and yet poor old Osono here, she looks totally lifeless and very dead.
I couldn't agree more. She looks absolutely dead. And a puppet is dead until the puppeteer puts his hands into the doll and starts moving. The head puppeteer will put his left hand in to move the head of the doll, and the right hand to move the right hand of the doll. But it actually, bringing the doll to life starts before that, because the puppeteer creates his own doll.
Really? What do you mean by that?
He is given a head, the kashira as it is called. He may have several heads, doll heads. Then he is given pieces of the costume, and he literally makes the doll by sewing the parts of the kimono onto a shoulder board, adding the obi, adding these different sashes, and he creates the doll.
It's amazing, isn't it? I had no idea about that.
That's the way the doll starts to come to life.
Well,
That's indeed very interesting, and I'm curious to know how the puppeteers make those inanimate dolls alive on the stage. You touched upon it, Barbara, but perhaps we can ask you to explain more while looking at a film of Monjuro's performance.
yes, indeed.
Well, this again is the famous soliloquy by Osono.
Is this the same doll?
It's not the same doll, but it's
Very similar.
very similar, yes.
The costume looks...
The costume is always the same,
Ah, I see.
and the head was carved by the same man. Now you can see Monjuro-san is moving the doll. He has his left hand in the back of the obi, moving the head of the doll, and his right hand is moving the right hand of the doll. His face shows. There are two other puppeteers who are dressed completely in black, and they are hooded. And one man manipulates the left arm of the doll. He uses his own right arm to move the left arm of the doll.
Now we can see the
Yes,
third
the third.
The third one, yes, he moves the legs. Now here we have the narrator, the storyteller, known as the Tayu. This is a very famous one, a living national treasure, Koshiji Dayu. And Kizaemon there, playing the shamisen. The Tayu takes all the parts, sets the mood, tells the story.
Is he reading from his script?
It
there?
looks as if he were reading, but he's memorized every word. He turns the pages and so forth. But he knows every word, every intonation.
And don't the puppeteers get mixed up with each other? Three in such complicated...
Bump each other.
bumping
You
into
would
each other?
think they would. The choreography is quite remarkable. But the man who moves the legs or makes the puppet look as if she had legs will have spent usually 10 or 15 years as the leg manipulator. So he knows how to stay out of the way.
My goodness.
The man who's working the left arm, he has spent 10 years as a leg manipulator and maybe 5 or 10 moving the left arm. So he knows how to stay out of the way of the chief puppeteer, in this case Monjuro. So it's carefully choreographed.
So you don't get to be chief puppeteer in 5 minutes.
No, it's more apt to take 25 years.
My goodness, no wonder they're experts.
And do these people make a sort of team and play together all the time?
Not always the same three, no. Monjuro-san would have, say, 2 or 3 whom he would often use for the left hand, and one that he would often use for the leg man.
Yeah.
Or to help one of his young apprentices, he might move the left arm and let his young man act as the chief puppeteer.
Isn't that interesting?
It's a way of training.
It seems to be always threes, doesn't it? Triangles in Bunraku.
Yes, I think that's what makes it so intriguing. Of course, you have the 3 working the one doll, the 3 puppeteers. Then you have the triangle of the puppet, the story, the music.
Yes.
The puppeteers, the meaning of the coming out of the storyteller's words, the sounds of the shamisen. And the way these triangles overlap, touch each other, overshadow each other, underpin each other. To me, that's one of the great fascinations of Bunraku.
Here she is, dead again.
Yes.
Isn't it remarkable how alive she becomes?
Well, I mean, she looks like a real woman, doesn't she?
Right, right. But I've noticed that Monjuro-san was higher than the rest of the people
Very
in
much
the
higher,
film.
wasn't he?
Yes.
Is
yes.
he naturally taller than the rest?
I used to think that all the head puppeteers were taller, but no. He uses what are called butai geta, which are very high clogs made out of wood. They're soled with straw sandals. Waraji are tied on. And these high geta allow the head puppeteer to move up higher than the other 2 puppeteers. Also allowed him to slide gracefully and quietly.
Yes, not clunking across the stage.
It's a very graceful dance step.
They look, but they look like heavy wooden.
They're very light. They're made
light,
of kiri, usually. Very light. But there's many a turned ankle because they are rather high.
Yes, falls off.
Now here you can see the head puppeteer who is unmasked, and the hooded one is moving the left arm of this male puppet, and the leg man, the male puppet does have legs, the leg man is again hidden. He really has to rush around to keep out of everyone's way.
Now, I noticed that when Monjuro touches his doll, the doll is perhaps more feminine than the actual living woman. And is he trying to create realism on the stage?
No, it's not an imitation of femininity, I would say. I'd say it's a distillation, a refinement. What he tries to get across is the essence of femininity. He's getting across femininity. He's also getting across loneliness, sadness, by moving the woman in a particular way.
And does a head puppeteer, does he study female behavior?
Oh, yes. Maybe rather naturally. Say if he happens to be at a party with many geisha, Monjuro said to me he would often watch the way the geisha would touch her hair because of the particular use of her hands.
Well, here we are again.
And you'll see, I think one of the most graceful things with these dolls is the use of the hands. And that lovely voice of the tayu.
Amazing. And Monjuro's expression totally blank.
Chief puppeteer is expressionless. The best ones are.
This is the famous scene of the lament, isn't
This
it?
is the famous lament of Osono, yes. And the combination of the beauty, I think, of the quality of the voice of the storyteller, the tayu, combined with the grace of the puppet and the very moving tones of the beautiful, heavy shamisen, combine to say something even if you cannot understand Japanese.
Oh, yes. It's extraordinary how they can work together.
Yes.
The left arm does know what the right arm is doing. And she is crying.
Now you can see the leg manipulator there in the middle. He's making it look as if she were kneeling on the tatami.
Right.
Is the doll very heavy?
The dolls weigh anywhere from about 6 kilos to about 20, 25 kilos. Say a male doll in full armor is very heavy. So they have to develop a great deal of muscle in their left arm.
Yes, indeed. Have to be quite strong. The hand movements are extraordinary too, aren't they?
But very smooth, don't you think? Graceful.
Yes.
There's no, none of the jerkiness that one would expect.
One would imagine, yes.
And you can imagine what wonderful coordination. And if those two hands didn't come together when she made her bow, it would be dreadful.
Yes.
Well, Monjiro was a puppeteer for almost his entire life. He entered when he was just a young child. He died at the age of 70. And now that's a special pose that is used to show off the grace, the line of the kimono, which is done for many female dolls.
Very beautiful, wasn't it?
Well, although it takes time, Hiromi-san, I'm beginning to speed up. It's
Yes.
most intriguing. Anyway, Barbara, I believe you've published a book on Bunraku entitled The Voices and Hands of Bunraku. Perhaps you might like to tell us how you arrived at that name for your book.
Well, it wasn't easy. In Japanese, the name of the book is Bunraku no Hitobito, which is a little more direct. But I felt that in Bunraku there were many, many voices. You have the voice of the storyteller, naturally. You have the shamisen player who lets out sounds every now and then. Even the puppeteers let out sounds, kakegoi every now and then. And so there are those voices. The hands, they're hands of many people. You have the hands of the puppeteer, the hands of the taiyu, the storyteller, holding on to the kendai, the stand on which he has his text. Of course, you have the hands of the shamisen player. You have the hands of the people backstage, the urakata, who are so important. You have the seamstress who makes the costumes. You have the... there's a shamisen player, of course, his hands obviously are so important. The hands of the man who carves the head. This head, as this Osono head, carved by Oe Minosuke of Shikoku. Oe-san has carved most of the heads in the Bunraku repertoire today, about almost 300 of them. And then you have the hands of the other people in the offstage music room. Look at all those heads, all carved by Oe-san.
And what are they made of? Are they wood?
Yes, they're made of hinoki, Japanese cypress, and then painted and given different expressions. The ones with round eyes are usually considered wicked.
Oh dear, Barbara.
And here's the puppeteer checking the head. The head of a doll has to be able to tilt up and down. Old shamisen strings are used for the strings there. And here the hairdresser, the tokoyama, the one who dresses the wigs. In fact, he makes the wigs. He's fitting the base of a wig onto a doll's head there. There's Nagoshi-san, who is the wig master. He's adjusting the very elaborate ornaments for a doll who is a head courtesan.
My goodness.
Some dolls have to have their hair dressed several times during each performance.
Oh, gracious.
It would be quite nice to send one's head out, though. Here's the costume man, Ishibashi-san. He's checking the various neck bands, eri. Those are of many different colors. Ishibashi-san knows exactly what type of an eri which puppeteer likes. For instance, one might like an eri that is soft and another one longer or harder. Now, this puppeteer is making his doll.
This is what you told us about earlier on, isn't
He's
it?
creating his doll. You can see what he's doing. He's putting a knot on the end of a thread there, preparing to sew the kimono onto the base.
Absolutely incredible. I had no idea that the puppeteer actually created his own doll like that.
Yes, there's a lot more to just moving the doll around. You make it first. You create it. And that's, of course, when they get into the role.
Well, it's, sorry.
No, I was interested in what Barbara said about the hands of shamisen players. I'm sure she has something to tell us.
Well, shamisen players' hands, of course, are terribly important to them. They should be insured at Lloyd's of London. But the left index finger is considered one of the most important. And Juzo-san, whose picture you see now, he is about 80. He just recently retired. But he told me that when he gets into a Japanese ofuro, he always keeps his left finger out of the water. The reason being that the tip of the finger must remain rather hard in order to get the right tone out of the silk strings. And if he even got it in the hot water once, it would be very bad.
Awfully difficult to take a bath.
Yes, it is. I've tried it. He asked me to. This is one of the offstage musicians blowing a whistle. They have many different whistles used. The evening crow and the morning crow have different whistles. They make different sounds, in case you haven't noticed that. And this is one of the men in the hidden sound room.
It sounds more complicated than kabuki, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, there are lots of complications, wonderful complications.
Except, I suppose, with dolls, you don't have the personal problems you have with kabuki actors.
No, there's a little temperament in Bunraku.
Well, anyway, Barbara, my knowledge of Bunraku, of course, is expanding rapidly, but I believe is it as old or older than kabuki?
Most people involved with Bunraku would say that it predates kabuki slightly, but I think the important thing is that its development went along much faster than kabuki, and it was more popular than kabuki before kabuki became so popular. In other words, dolls attracted more people than live actors for quite a while.
Yes, well, obviously, modern Japan is very, very different from the early Edo period, and as Hiromi-san said at the very beginning of the program, a lot of Japanese people think today, well, you know, it's old-fashioned, out of date, has no relevance. Do you think that people today can understand Bunraku culturally and psychologically?
Yes, I think many of the themes are very difficult for us to understand if we don't know something about the history and say, the values of the Edo period. But on the other hand, everyone understands sacrifice, everyone understands the problem of dealing with the infidelity of a husband or a wife or a lover or whatever, or losing a child or losing a parent or being loyal to someone. So they are old values, but they can be understood. But I also feel so strongly that one mustn't go to Bunraku with the idea that one must understand everything. Bunraku can be understood on many, many different levels. And if you start at a low level, don't be discouraged. Eventually you'll move up, perhaps slowly.
Well, I'm certainly beginning to understand Hiromi-san, and I'm sure I'm going to find it much more enjoyable, because I suppose one saw it once and said, oh, well, that's not for me. I mean, frankly, I got that impression by looking at No on television. I said, this is just beyond me. I sort of gave up.
Well, of course, No and Bunraku are so different because Bunraku is a form of very popular entertainment. There are lots of jokes, a lot of naughty jokes, there's a lot of flirtation, and there's all sorts of excitement. And certainly it's a faster pace than No, which I think is beautiful, but it is much more difficult to understand.
But sometimes as a Japanese, I feel I ought to be able to understand Bunraku and ought to be able to appreciate its beauty, etc.
And sit out the whole performance.
Right, and when I can't, I feel sort of guilty and annoyed at myself, or at Bunraku for that matter.
I think many people feel that way, but I think it's too bad. I think they should go perhaps and relax, and if they do relax, something will touch them, something will move them, the sound of the words, the music, whatever. And then when you find that you're not being amused, you're not relaxing, you're resisting it, get up and go home, and then go again.
Yes.
But
So
don't worry about it.
it's not necessary to just grind your teeth and sit through the whole performance.
Absolutely not. No.
Well.
But I have a feeling that some younger Japanese may not be interested in going to Bunraku nowadays.
Well, it's interesting. I've noticed a great change in the last, say, 5 or 6 years. 10 years ago, I'd say the audience was a good 85% old men and women, mostly women. Now, more and more, there are younger people. Younger people, even holding hands. They must be on dates or whatever, going to the Bunraku, which seems really quite remarkable.
Well, how would you describe this phenomenon, Barbara? I mean, why?
Well, I think there is a return to traditional interest, traditional things in Japan in general. And also, I think there's a great curiosity. Of course, it's shown on television.
I was going to say, it's the good old television again and again.
Yes.
People actually having it in their living rooms and sitting down and looking at it for a few moments and saying, oh, well, maybe that's more interesting than I thought it was.
Of course, on television, I always say it's not Bunraku because it's only one part of the triangle. So to see all the triangles, the thing to do is go.
Well, what advice would you give to a newly arrived foreigner in Japan about Bunraku, in a nutshell?
I would say go, stay for a little while, and when you start twitching, either get up and go out and have a Coke or a glass of beer, or go home. And then go again.
Yes.
And can we see it any time?
The troupe comes to Tokyo for about 15 days, 4 times a year, in September, December, February, and May. It's in Osaka now in October, and again in January, April, and July.
Sorry, interrupting. Osaka is the sort of headquarters of Bunraku in Japan, is it?
Yes, the headquarters. And then they travel all over Japan. So you can't miss it from Hokkaido to Okinawa.
There's always plenty of time. Well, if Bunraku takes time, let's give it some time,
Yes,
Hiromi-san,
very
and we
true.
recommend that to our viewers. And I certainly recommend that foreigners read your book as well. Perhaps take it with them as they go to the show, eh? Anyway, I hope your book is a great success and that it spreads your enthusiasm and love of Bunraku. So, thank you very much indeed for coming along today and telling us all about it.
Thank you. It was fun being here.
Till next time, it's goodbye from us all here.
Goodbye.